Ruchem Avon B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Yegin Shiritar, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Smith Shlita on challenging Maakeh questions. Shir Kloli B'Hilchos Chiyav Asiyas Maakeh. Rabbi Bigash Shekayach to Mr. Elisha Hollander for sponsoring today's shir. Lidu Nishmas Oviv of Modche Ben Elisha Kohen Tzchen Ravacha. And it's supposed to Tzura B'Tzura Chaim to have the great Tzlus sponsoring his shir. Call Yegin Shiritar at 718-851. 8651, email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
We had the shaila recently where someone had a question. He had a tenant moved into an apartment and it needed a Maakeh. We'll soon see the details, but there was definitely a Maakeh, and the question was who had to build it and who had to pay for it. It's a very costly experience, and the shaila was: is it a chiyuv on the landlord? Is it a chiyuv on the tenant? And also, when does the chiyuv begin? Does he have a 30-day grace period until he moves in, like we find by mezuzah? So we'll see, Bez Hashem, today. It's really a big sugi with many nafkaminas, and we'll soon see a variety of questions regarding the chiyuv, when the chiyuv begins, when is there a chiyuv on a porch and a small porch, and different questions. But our derech ways is try to find one yesod that hopefully will give us the guidance to the whole sugya. I think today we have to ask a simple question. What is the nature of this unique chiyuv of building a Maakeh? The truth is, besides the lav of leisasum damim veisecha, we'll soon see there's also an asay of building a Maakeh, and there's also the element of sakana. But is there something that we know that is similar to that, so we can look at the halachos of that and then compare it to a Maakeh? Because Maakeh is only one siman in Shulchan Aruch, there's not too much about it. But is there something that we could compare Maakeh to? So probably the closest mitzvah that we could think of that really comes close to Maakeh is the mitzvah of mezuzah. You see, really both of them make up the kosher home. See, a kosher kitchen is a whole different sugya. But the structure, the building, has to have a mezuzah and has to have a Maakeh. Is that enough that we could compare Hilchas Maakeh to Hilchas Mezuzah? And as we'll see, the Paiskim sometimes do compare Maakeh to Mezuzah. And it's interesting, Chaim Kanievsky over 60 years ago wrote one of his many svarim on Masechta Tzitzis Tefillin and Mezuzah. In the back of that he has like a Mishnah Berurah style pirish on Hilchas Mezuzah. Probably the first one that wrote a Mishnah Berurah style on halacha different than the Mishnah Berurah's Chafetz Chaim, the Chafetz Chaim Mishnah Berurah. So he has the Hilchas Mezuzah with the Mishnah Berurah. At the end he has Siman Taf Chav Zayin, Hilchas Maakeh. And his brother-in-law, Rabbi Auerbach, put it aside a number of years ago, Levushay Oiz, also Hilchas Mezuzah, and at the back Hilchas Maakeh. Now the truth is, Mezuzah, Hilchas Mezuzah is in Yeridea. Hilchas Maakeh is the very last siman in Choshen Mishpat. So who said you can compare the two? But that's really our question. I'd like to try to clarify. Is there enough of a comparison between Hilchas Mezuzah and Hilchas Maakeh? And then hopefully it'll be easier. So like every good sugya, if you want to enjoy it, you look to the source. The pasuk says in Parashat Kislev, Kisivna bayis chodosh, which is a strange word. Dafka, a new house. If you buy a house from a guy, there's no chiyuv Maakeh. But let's move on. Vasisa Maakeh ligagecha. You have to make a Maakeh to your gag. Now that seems to imply that the chiyuv of Maakeh is only by a roof. How about a porch? But let's move on. Besides building a Maakeh, don't keep a dangerous situation at home. Because someone will fall down. Now, we'll get to the other diyukim soon, but the most obvious diyuk, there seems to be a redundancy. The pasuk seems to be repeating it. Build a Maakeh and don't keep that dangerous situation in your home. But obviously there's no extra ice in the Torah. What does it mean? Zogt the Sifri on this pasuk, Vasisa Maakeh l'gagecha mitzvahs aseh. There's a mitzvah deraisa to build a Maakeh like there is to shake lulav. Loisasim damim b'veisecha is a mitzvahs loisaseh. Unlike many other mitzvahs aseh, mostly if you don't shake lulav, there's no loisaseh. But here, if you don't do the Maakeh, besides the bittul aseh, there's also an issa deraisa loisaseh, no different than eating tarfus. And all the money mitzvahs counted as two mitzvahs, the aseh of building a Maakeh, and the loiseh of leaving a dangerous situation. And this is quoted in Chaysheh Mishpat. Today our simon is Tav Chav Zayin in Chaysheh Mishpat. Sivav, if you don't build a Maakeh, you mevatel an aseh, and oiva an a loisaseh. The Minchas Chinuch in Tav Kuf Nemvav, right in the beginning, he says, Poshet, if a person has a Chi of Maakeh, and he doesn't build a Maakeh right away, so b'chol rega oiva an loisaseh v'aseh. It's not just do it or not, but every moment the clock is ticking. There's an aseh and loiseh in not fulfilling that mitzvah. He says, and even if he does it a week later, it's not misakin retroactively because he went a week without doing the mitzvah. And then he adds, taka, if a person doesn't do lulav until the end of the day, so lemaisa, if he did it bizman, he was yaitza. There's no issa. But this is a mitzvah, it has to be done every moment, and there's a bittul aseh and loisaseh if it's not done every moment. Mida toiva meruba, of course, if a person does do a Maakeh, does put up the Maakeh, he has a mitzvah every moment, and he's becoming the loisaseh. And the Charedim in Perikei, Simon Chavei says it, if you have a Maakeh and you maintain it, you keep checking it to see if it's okay, then lemaisa, there's a mitzvah b'chol every moment of that you have the mitzvah, the Yosef Oimitz, and Taf Bayal says the same thing. So we see something interesting. Besides the aseh, there's also loisaseh. Now, once you have the element of sakana loisasim damim b'veisecha, we have another key factor, and that's what the Chazal says. The Shulchan Aruch quotes it a number of places. Chamira sakanta meisura. Typically, if you have a suffix d'Rabbanan, so you could say Sveika d'Rabbanan lahakol. But a suffix in sakana, a suffix if there's meat that's mixed up with fish, that's awesome. How could it be that this is only the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, a suffix d'Rabbanan is okay, and a suffix sakana is awesome? So besides that, a sakana could be a deraisa, but more than that, chamira sakanta meisura. So now we have a better understanding of the mitzvah. Let's try to apply it lamaisa. One thing l'chayra is pashut. Let's say a person built a home, and the Chazal tell us if a person wants to become poor, just build a home. Construction is a big school for becoming poor. Lamaisa, he realizes he has to make a Maakeh. He gets an estimate. $1,000. I ran out of money. I'll wait a month. He has no money, and he comes with a cheshbon. A mitzvah say you only have to spend the chaimish. I don't even have that. So it's a very good svara, but not by this mitzvah. By a regular say, we could say chaimish is the cap. More than that, you're not mechuyev to pay. But here you have a loisa say, a loisa you have to give kol mamonim. So therefore, once there is a chiyuv, avada, there's no heta to say it's too expensive. Lamaisa, for a loisa say, a person has to be willing to spend a lot more than that. What's much more negeya, and this brings us to a key aside, an understanding of the Maakeh. The question is, I guess you have to try to remember from your Gerst to Yankasa, but I'm still in a camp, and the yeshivas and camps that are Baruch Hashem bursting at the seams, and to fit the Baruch in, they have bunk beds. Now, Lamaisa, the top bunk bed is definitely higher than 10 tvachim. Of course, we know that. The Chiva Maakeh is at a gag that's higher than 10 tvachim, which is not that much. Don't forget. The Gemara in Bava Kama tells us that 10 tvachim is v'chadei sheyamas, the person get hurt. And 10 tvachim, between 35 and 40 inches, l'chumra we should assume 35 inches. A standard table is 30 inches. So imagine 5 inches higher is already chayiv a Maakeh. 5 or 10 for sure. The question is, a bunk bed is certainly higher than 10 tefachim. So one bracha told me, I don't know if he's from or krum, but he insisted that the camp built for him a Maakeh 10 tefachim on his bed. But it's not true. But the question is, why is it no chiyuv? It's 10 tefachim above the ground. Another camp question. Some camps don't have it, but some do. They have a stage where they make plays, performances. The stage is definitely 10 tefachim above the ground. So here we come to an important yesod that really we have to clarify. Imagine someone goes to Grand Canyon and he looks down and he's about to say the bracha, he goes, oh, I didn't have a Maakeh. I'm allowed to go here. It's very high above the ground. Well, I'll tell you something else. How could you come to the shir today? The steps going up are more than 10 tefachim. I was thinking, coming is not the problem. You can't go home because you can't go down. You're looking down. It's definitely more than 10 tefachim. So the truth is, pashtus, it doesn't make sense that you can't go to a high place. A person wants to pick apples, he can't climb on the tree, but it's higher than 10 tefachim. More so, this is not svaras, this is a pasuk in the Torah. The Gemara above Metzia Kuf Yud Beis, speaking about the importance of paying the worker on time, Zog the Gemara, based on the pasuk, Elavu Noisa Nafshe. How could you not be a mensch and pay him on time? Do you know that he was Moisa Nefesh for you to do his job? So the Gemara explains, why did he climb on your roof to fix your roof? Why did he climb on a tree to pick apples for you? He wants to get paid. So pay him. But the obvious implication is, the Gemara has no problem with someone being a roofer, or someone climbing on a tree to pick apples, or any other job that entails going high. Why is there no issa? Why is there no chiyuv Maakeh, and maybe an issa of going without a Maakeh? So the Helug Chazanish has a big yesod in Chayshim Mishpat Likutim Siman Yud Ches, which is a share for itself, Oit Chazayin Lamoy, but the Chazanish has a big yesod, and not characteristically of him, he's very makel. And his basic yesod is that Lamaisa, a person that goes in a high area is careful. You know, that's one of the pshatim. Adam Islay Maza, a person is careful. You want to be a roofer, you have to learn the trade of working on a high roof. And Zok Chazanish, he brings out Gemara. Just like we see in the Torah, you're allowed to climb on a tree or climb on a roof to do a job. Why? Because you're being careful. So what then is the chiyuv Maakeh lagagecha? So the Chazanish, that the Maakeh that you use commonly, and we'll soon see, especially in times of the Gemara, times of the Torah actually, the gag was one of the rooms of the house. They always built flat roofs to be able to use the roof. You find the Gemara used to bring up the peiros to dry on the roof. You'd build the sukkah on the roof. You'd make the chuppah on the roof. A lot of action going on the roof. So the fact that you use it so frequently, you get a little bit numb and a little bit, callous about it, and you're not so careful. So the fact that you use it a lot and you get used to it, he says lashon of tamidus, that is why there's a chiyuv on gag. Then he does it, we'll soon see an extremely important nafkamina, but also, and this is grad in Shulchan Aruch, there's a chiyuv to make a Maakeh, or a fence or a gate, around a bar or a be'er that's 10 tvachim deep. Why? He says that could be more of a chiyuv, because when you're walking in the street you don't see the bar. So then you got to make the bala bar has to make a protective fence. But in a typical place, a person's careful because he sees it. But on a gag, that's the main chiyuv. According to the Chazanish, it's pashut why a bunk bed is not a chiyuv Maakeh. It's not a gag. And Taka, the Shulchan Alevi, the end of Perek Chav Gimel, he says, he doesn't mention the Chazanish, but I'm sure that's what he means to say. It doesn't have a din of a gag. It's more like a keli than a gag. And basically he says, and he had a lot of camp experience, that Lamaisa, the Metzias is, we never hear of a problem from a bunk bed, so there is no chiyuv of Maakeh on a bunk bed. Right. Now Lamaisa, I must say, most poskim take strong exception to the Chazanish, and they say, how could you make such a statement? It's only a gag, and what about a porch? A porch is not chayiv and a mezuzah like the Chazanish. So we'll soon see there are two types of porches. There's some porches, like an upstairs porch, that's a gag for the downstairs. But let's say today, many new homes, they have just a porch extending out of the house itself. Nothing, it's not at all a gag, nothing under it. So most poskim say it's gag or something similar. But even they could understand that a bunk bed is not close enough to the chiyuv of gagecha. But here's the big but, and that's probably the most important insight for today. Because even in a situation that we are certain there's no chiyuv of Maakeh gagecha, but don't forget the second half of the pasuk, leisasim damim beveisecha. That is totally independent from the chiyuv Maakeh. So even if you're going to say that a bunk bed does not have a chiyuv of Maakeh, but if it's dangerous, you have to remedy the problem. And that's why camps across the board, they do install a bar on a bunk bed. You see, a bar is not a valid Maakeh. Maakeh has to be 10 tvachim, but a bar does take away the danger. So had it been a chiyuv of Maakeh, you can't put a bar on your roof. It doesn't work, I don't know. But a bunk bed, there's no chiyuv of Maakeh, but dam l'sech you do have a problem of. There, the solution would be a typical bar that does the trick. Now, this is extremely important to mention because, as the Shulchan Aruch says it clearly based on the Rambam in Siv Ches, Kol michshel sheyesh b'sakanas nefashos mitzvah say lasira l'sham menu ulizor b'dav v'yafeh. Not pashut. Very careful. Shenem yisham lecha ushmar nafshecha. And if you didn't remove this danger, you're over on leisasim damim beveisecha. So that's very important to realize that even if there's no chiyuv of Maakeh, there's a chiyuv deraisa to be careful. I'd like to give you a few mishalim that I think are very practical. Baruch Hashem, the children get married, but a few years later they're great. Now, typically in a home, during the spring and summer, you keep the windows open. Now this window, Grad, is a good mashal. If you look at the window, so this is the English word I found out, the space from the ground until the windowsill is called a window apron. Don't ask me why, but that's the right word, a window apron. This window apron happens to be probably around less than 30 inches. Now, the question is there a chiyuv Maakeh because of the fact that the window's open and the person could go falling straight down? So adults don't fall out the window, but children or grandchildren do. Chas v'shalom. In an attic apartment, you could see a window apron that's even lower than this. But this is a perfect example. It's lower than the table. So Lamaisa, there's a beautiful shtickle in the Emek bracha, Rabbi Mamchik, in Amud Lamed Dalet, and he's convinced, Avada, if there's no... See, if the window apron would be 35 inches, 40 inches is better, then that would be the Maakeh. But it is no Maakeh. It's an open area to the fall that falls down much more than 10 tvachim. So he's convinced that the chiyuv Maakeh on a window that's lower than 10 tvachim, the chumrah lower than 35 inches. Lamaisa, most poskim disagree. The Machzor Eliyahu, Chelik Aleph, Kuf Chavav, and Kuf Chav Aleph, I'm sorry. And one of the tainas are that there's no Maakeh on a kevesh that says in the Sifri, a ramp going down, even though the highest point is higher than 10 tvachim. Because it's not similar enough to a gag. Now, a porch, of course, is. But a window, typically, is not the same structure like a gag. Now, he has another time, he says, and the window was closed, so then the glass pane could be a protection. Now, he says that the Emek bracha tain is that glass breaks. So this, he says something that he said he saw, I guess when he was a child. He saw they advertised, they were showing the strength of glass. So they had an elevator that was carrying 5 elephants, and the bottom of the elevator, the floor of the elevator was glass. And he says that glass really, unless you crack it, it's very strong. Of course, if you throw something at it, it breaks. But he says that, who said that window can't be a Maakeh? So Lamaisa, what's interesting is, although many poskim are making no chiyuv Maakeh on a window, but there's definitely, no doubt about it, a chiyuv leisasim damim beveisecha. To leave the windows open when they're eniklach walking around the house is a very dangerous situation. And why do we hear stories? So even if there's no chiyuv of Maakeh, there's a chiyuv to put in window bars Als Leisasim, and Taka the Rav Stern B'Chelik Alf Tafsaf Memches the Shev Rekasi Dalit Shen Yirala. Both say that even if there's no Chi of Maakeh, but there's a Chi of Leisasim Dam Memveisecha, and a person has to be very careful with that. Now, Avada, there are eights. If you can install a window guard, open the window from the top, so now you have 2 window panes protecting you. But please remember this, that when the grandchildren come, you can't press the mode, the child safety mode. The house doesn't start to reconstruct like you have a Shabbos mode refrigerator. So you have to make sure the windows are closed, and the windows that you don't go to are closed, because don't forget, windows are a lot of fun to sit on, and chas v'sholom, when they hear a siren, they want to see what's doing at any cost. So it's extremely important. Okay, now is the winter, but extremely important that if you know children, or of course, or grandchildren, window guards is definitely very much a chiyuv, unless you're very, very careful to make sure windows are locked and the window panes are protective enough for the child. Another important point to mention, and the Shulchan Aruch and Siv Zayin quotes the Rambam, there's a chiyuv of Maakeh, daraisa, on a bor that's 10 tefachim deep, or be'er, bein sheyesh b'mayim, bein she'ein b'mayim, because the water is part of the sakana. Now this, the Chazon Ish himself, Bavorans, although it's not a gag, but it has a greater sakana because you are unaware of it, and chas shalom, a person can get hurt. The Shulchan Aruch does say that if you cover the bor or the be'er with a sufficient cover, that's enough. Now where does it have an important ramification halacha? It's something called a pool. We'll soon see a mikveh, the same problem. A pool is not any less of a sakana than a be'er that's full of water. In fact, the pool could be 6 feet deep. Now, lamaisa, is there a chiyuv deraisa to build a maakeh around a pool? Maybe. Why not? I know someone told me he had a pool and he put a gate around it when he bought a house from a guy, and the Rav says put her in the maakeh and make beloy shem malchus, but make a bracha, because you should know you're mechuyev in a maakeh around the pool. Why? Very pashut. You let the children go play in the yard, that's good. But if the pool is totally exposed, they could fall in, chas v'shalom. And no one wants to fall in, but it's fun to check and whatever. But we don't need imagination to know it's a sakana.
Where do you put the maakeh?
Good. So that's the question. So lamaisa, in a private home, you could put a maakeh around the pool, lock the door, and when you go swimming, open the door. And then you're coming in with children, and you're watching them. The question is, in a camp, in a moisa that has a pool area, where do you put the maakeh? So lamaisa, it's unreasonable to put it around the pool, because then, if you can't fit any lifeguards or whatever's needed. So the assumption has to be that if you have a shmir at all times, and it could be the pool, lamaisa, there are enough people that are watching, that would be a way of remedying the problem. It's just not practical. It's like, the stage. A stage is high above. What are you supposed to do? You put a maakeh, then you can't make a play. So you have to rely on that. You have to be careful. Adam islay mazel, and be careful. So again, it's not a perfect teretz, but you're right. In a camp, you have to assume that there's hashgach at all times, and that would take away the sakana. But again, chalila, to leave a pool open, unlocked, unattended, that's an emes sakana. Mikvah is the same thing. The children are bored during davening, they go downstairs. Mikvah, wow, they never saw before. What is it? A chalila, a very big sakana could come out. So here we're going to say, hopefully, there's no chiv maakeh on a mikvah or a pool area, but there has to be some type of protection around it that makes it off limits when it's not being used and it's not hashgach. A different case, which is close to my heart, now it's already coming to winter, and that is leaving a sidewalk that's not shoveled or icy. So again, it's not an issa deraisa of makol kagecha, but it's definitely a very serious loisasim. People trip, older people trip quicker, older people have bones that are brittle, and the person that breaks a bone, it's a very long recovery. I heard from chashuva people that they fell, it took them years to recover. Chashuva people, not chashuva, it makes no difference. But besides the chil Hashem, if we leave our sidewalks unshoveled, but it's really a serious problem. Now again, Shabbos is a problem, we can't shovel, but at least Matzori Shabbos, we should be the first to shovel right after Havdalah, take away this sakon. I want to mention, because really it needs to share for itself, but today there's a new chiyav gama l'chayra of Maakeh. And that is when they're building new homes, so it's very convenient to make a basement apartment. That could be the length of an apartment. It's a great income, a great rental, but you don't want to live in the darkness. So they have a new idea, new, it's from 15, 20 years for sure, that they have windows throughout the basement, what's called a window well. Basically, they dig a deep hole, so you have air from the outdoors, you have light, so you feel like you're living in a normal apartment. L'chayra, that would be a chiyuv Maakeh daraisa, even like the Chazon Ish. Because when you say you dug a hole has a Hebrew word, you know what it is? Bar. So if you have a bar, that's more than 10 tvachim deep in the backyard or front yard where the children are playing, and he's moving back to catch a ball, looking this way, and it's behind him, that's mamash a chiyuv deraisa. And even though it's not a gag, but that would fit into bar. So something has to be done. People put some type of fence around it. They put bars around it, but something has to be done. This is mamish, an example of the Shulchan Aruch's bar that's chayiv and a Maakeh. Now, lamaisa, I hope it's clear that lamaisa, a Maakeh is not similar to the mitzvah of mezuzah. Mezuzah has the mitzvah element, which is very chashuv, and even it has the shmira element, but it's not the main thrust is not sakana like we see by Maakeh. Maakeh has Maakeh has chamir sakanta misura, and that's why lamaisa. I heard this. I hope it was a joke, but I think it was serious. Someone had an old-fashioned porch with an old-fashioned gate around it. If you call it a gate, it wasn't like today the iron railing. He had slats of wood, and in between the slats there was enough room for a child to squeeze through. Chas v'shalom. So someone says, you got to get a Maakeh. It's ridiculous. He goes, what do you mean? Don't you see it's lavud? From one slat to the next was less than gimel tvachim. Love it. So I told the person, why don't you make a tiny Maakeh and you say a gurasik, a guraches? The teretz is, you can't tell the malach hamav as lamdis. If it's not a protective wall, then the fact that in Hilchas Sukkah it works is very nice. Hilchas Erevin it works. But Dr. Chaim Kanievsky in a safe attack on Hilchas Maakeh, all say that if it's not a protective fence, Lamdis, Hilchas Erevin, Hilchas Mechitzas does not work for Hilchas Maakeh. And it's pashut. Now I will say one thing, if you have a chain link fence, which the Maisa is paretz merubah ala oimid, most of it is open, but that is sufficient because the Maisa does the trick. But if there's areas that you could squeeze through that, avada, that's not a sufficient Maakeh. The next question comes in many forms, and that is basically, let's say you have a real gag. We're talking about the premium chiyuv gag, an emissary gag, but you rarely used it. Now, lamaisa, that's interesting that in Eretz Yisrael, this is the shayla that they have. They don't use the roofs, it seems, in many homes, but they have the dud shemesh, they have the water tank that they fix when they have to. You go up once a year. Is once a year a infrequent usage enough to be mechayev? So let's make it a little more gishmak. The pasuk makes the chiyuv Maakeh l'gagecha. So the Aruch HaShulchan and Sifei and his son the third Tamim and Kisei Tzichav Beis Hey both wonder, why did the Torah establish the chiyuv by a gag of all places? Again, in our times, I have a house almost 30 years. I don't know how to get to the gag. I never went on the gag. And Punkt, the chiyuv is by a gag. We have slanty roofs. So the Aruch HaShulchan and his son the third Tamim both say the same. Yesod exactly. In those days in Eretz Yisrael, they built a flat gag. The gag was like a porch of today. It was one of the rooms of the house. They had big families and small bank accounts, and they couldn't afford to make big homes. The gag was used, especially in the warmer climates in the Middle Eastern countries. It was warm for a good part of the year. You could use the gag. So basically, that's why gag was the symbol of a chiyuv. And Taka the Chazon Ish said that the gag was used frequently, and a person became less sensitive to be concerned. So Bazoi will say, maybe Taka, if it's once a year, maybe Taka, you would be potter. And maybe we're tempted to compare this to Hilchas Mezuzah. The Aruch HaShulchan in the end of Siman Reish Peites and Hilch in Yerideyim, in Hilchos Mezuzah, based on a Shita Mekubetzes, if a person has many homes, and one home he uses once a year, that's it, 1 day a year, Zok the Shita Bav Metzia Kuf Aleph Mebeis, he is Chayiv and Mezuzah, because it's Beis Echad, it's totally in Dira. So maybe we'll say, Hu Adin Maakeh, once a year is enough. But believe it or not, the Paiskim are not to be Makel. In this case, a chilik where Maakeh might be a little more the cooler than a mezuzah. And this far is Pasha. The din of mezuzah, Chayvas Hador, is totally in Dira. If you live there, you're Chayv in a mezuzah. Once a year, so once a year is also a lot. But Lamaisa Maakeh, the point is it a Makam Sakana? Can you climb up on a tree and be careful? Why not? Can you go to a mountain and look down and be careful? Why not? Can a person climb up on a ladder to change the bulb? And for him it's mamash, he says vidu before he goes, he's so scared. There's adrabah. It's so infrequent you do it, so you're careful. Could be a gag that's rarely used. When you do go, you go with great fear and you're careful. And listen to this. The Rashba in the Tshuva Chelik Beis Mem Gimel writes, I'm surprised in my countries they don't build micas for the Gagim. What's going on here? He says, I know why. Because they never use it. It's not royal Shimush. When you walk in it, you break it. And also they go once a year, once in 2 years, once in 3 years. Nah, not a chiyuv. So the Rashba says 2 reasons not to make a Maakeh. Number 1, it's not royal to use. And number 2, you don't use it that often. So, Lamaisa, it seems that if it's not roy for shimush, and our slanty roofs are not roy for shimush, although it's a gag, there's no chiyuv. Now the Ramshik has a chiddush gadol in the Sefer Mitzvahs Tavkov Mem Zayin. He says Mitzvahs Maakeh b'chol oifen, even if you never use the gag, asisa Maakeh legagecha. Now exactly what he means to say that your mamish never use it, is it roy or not? But he wants to say that's the chiv of Maakeh, even if they have no tzoyrech. The Shevet HaLevi says it doesn't seem so from the Rashba, and the Rashba seems to say that if that the fact that you don't use it would be a ptur. But the question is somewhere in between. It's roy l'shimush. Let's say you have a flat roof, but you use it very infrequently. You know, our slanty roofs, there's nothing to talk about. But if you use it infrequently, so we could say that if you use it mamish once a year, again you go with caution, because that's the chayra pashit. If you lock the door leading to the roof, and no one has the key, so that would be an eitzah. Now I say typically in a home, but in a yeshiva, when you lock the door, every bracha has a key to everything, and if you write danger, beware, don't go on the roof, that makes it more of a yetzer to go. But lamaisa, a usable roof that's locked, the place can seem to say that's okay. But if you use it once a year, but lamaisa it's open. But again, if you go with great caution, the chayra from the Rashba, we could deduce, even though it's not a raya brura, that lamaisa it would be potter. Rav Vosna says that no, it's not true. The Rashba's only heta is if you can't use it. You can't use it. Once a year you brave it, hope you don't break it. But I saw many paiskim, the Taka the Torah Tamima, the Klarzman has a beautiful tshuva in Divrei Yatzach Chosh Mishpat, Pei Beis, the Stipend crying the Igros of Beis, Kuf Mem Gimel. They all say a roof that's used very infrequently, so you go very carefully, could be there's no chiyuv of Maakeh. Now, Lamaisa, I also saw Vashem, Moshe Halberstam and Shmuel Oyebach also say this yesod regarding the dud shemesh. You go whenever you have to appear the dud shemesh, and that's not a chiyuv of Maakeh. And the truth is, we have a roof that comes to the house, our roofs, slanty roofs. There's no Maakeh, but that has to be the svara. They go with caution. I saw a shayla, his home near the shul. Whenever they make a chanasa sefer Torah, they climb up on this roof and they put up lights. So you have to make a Maakeh for that. How often do they give a sefer Torah? Then avad l'chayr should be put. L'idach gisa, and this is pashut, and today it's being done very commonly. A moisid that wants to have a safe playground, So they have it on the roof. They have the flat roof, and they make a very good, not just a Maakeh of 10 tvachim. If they have, of course, they have seichel with children, plushly playing. So they make it very high. That's a perfect mitzvah of Maakeh, a zicha chiyuv deraisa l'chol days. The question is, the person has a roof, a flat rooftop he doesn't use, but the children from the next house, wherever they play, they climb up on it. So really it's hard to say he's mechuyev if it's not him that's using it. But l'maisa, if it's a dangerous situation and you can't blame children, a person has to take the proper precautions that shouldn't be dangerous. The Shevet HaLevi and Hey Reish Chaval Laris Nasan Beis Kuf Yud Ois Dalid both say that if there's a chiyuv Maakeh, putting up a sign, beware, be careful, is not enough. Once there's a chiyuv Maakeh, avada and avada, it doesn't help being cautious. The only chiddush we're saying is, if it's kamat never used, there's no chiyuv of Maakeh. A challenging question: a person has a flat roof, he never uses it except once a year. Listen to this: he builds a sukkah on the roof. Is there a chiyuv Maakeh because he's building a sukkah? So really, it's interesting. This is another beautiful nafkamina, because if you compare it to mezuzah, so mezuzah, there's no chiyuv mezuzah on a sukkah, because the year is haroy. Can we say hu adin Maakeh? And the answer is absolutely not. Because even though it's an haroy, but 8 days of use is a sakana. So the chap here might be, if let's say you make the sukkah that encloses the entire roof. In other words, you open the door going to the roof, and you walk into a big sukkah. So the sukkah itself could be a Maakeh. And I saw the B'tzei Lachochem Chel Dal Kuf Yud Zayin says if that's the case, then make sure you build the Maakeh, you build the sukkah, because you've been kind of mitzvah of Maakeh, and even entertains the thought of making a bracha, because the ma'is you're making a Maakeh l'gagecha. What's the difference that it's a sukkah? But if the sukkah walls, quote unquote, are not protective enough, they are flimsy canvas, then he says it's a problem. You have to make a Maakeh besides the sukkah. Now he says, and even if you make the sukkah in the center of the porch, it doesn't help, because the rest of the perimeter is exposed to the gag. So it's no doubt about it that a sukkah built on a roof would be chayiv and a Maakeh. Rabbi Yashiv, if this taught me, I believe he said this in Asher Yesh Chelek Gimel Amud Kuf Nun. He says, just like there's no issa of using a roof once in a while, like we said earlier, or using a roof without a Maakeh once in a while, so maybe for sukkah also. But the emphasis is if it's 8 days of use, and again the whole roof is exposed, how could there not be a chiyuv? Rav Shlomo Zalman, Lich Shlomo, Amud Kuf Test, Rav Sternbuch, Rav Chaim Kanievsky all say regarding this very shaila, if the sukkah is not a Maakeh, then you have to build a Maakeh. Next question, beautiful shaila. Today, in our neighborhoods where every inch of space counts, I've seen many times you have a porch that's very small. If you measure it, it's less than $1 amis al $1 amis. The question is, if you go with the sheet is that a porch is chayiv and a mezuzah, is a porch that's less than $1 al $1 mechuyev and a mezuzah? And you'll see the new type of little porches just to walk out is not $1 al $1. How about a clubhouse? 10 tvachim above the ground, not $1 al $1. So here, you don't have to speculate. Here we find a Gemara. Actually, Shulchan Aruch, I should say, in Siv Beis, Bayish she'ein by $1 al $1, Amois, Potlemi Maakeh. This is based on a sukkah, Dav Gimel, Bayish she'ein by $1 al $1, Potlem and a mezuzah, listen to this, and Potlem and a Maakeh. So here the Gemara makes a comparison, if you could say that, between mezuzah and Maakeh. Now, the obvious question is, enechanami mezuzah is potter, because it has to have it has to have $1 das and the bias. But why should a Maakeh be totally in small? But then again, you can't argue on a Gemara and Shulchan Aruch. So the emes is that we could add something, maybe makes it a little easier. It's true, a room smaller than $1 is part of mezuzah. There is a famous chiddush of the Chamura Daniel that the Pesachei Tshuva quotes it, that if you have a small room that's very functional, you use it, you enjoy it, it's chayiv and mezuzah. A good example would be a walk-in closet. It's not $1 al $1. So he assumes that the Torah of $1 al $1 by sukkah is because it's too small to have usage. But if you make a use out of a walk-in closet, it's chayiv and mezuzah. So we could say the following: Loi techamud Daniel. If you have a functional room called a walk-in, a clubhouse, or a porch, which is very functional, you enjoy it, so then it doesn't have the patur of dalet al dalet. Mos, and then I take us all the Maakeh in Chelik Alf Kuf Chav Beis Yivka and Gimel, quoting Rabbi Yashim, says certainly that's true. If Chamud Daniel holds Yechaya by mezuzah, who adin Maakeh? But we could advance a thought that maybe even if you argue on the Chamud Daniel by mezuzah, because maybe it's not a din of a bias, but if you're using this small room, so how could there not be a chiyuv of Maakeh? And I was thinking, and maybe this is the truth also, the Gemara is talking about a bias she'ein by dalit. That means the house itself, and so then the roof is the same small. But if you have a big bias, but leads to a small porch, so else the bias should be it's more than dalit al dalit. But the Maisa, it seems very clear that, and I saw in a beautiful sefer Bרכas Toiv, he quotes a number of poskim, but he says another point. Maybe you compare it to bor. Bor is chayiv midaraisa in Maakeh, even though it's not dalit al dalit. The teretz is if it's functional, if you use it, and it has that danger element, how could you not put up a Maakeh? So the Maisa, it seems clear that a clubhouse, if it's used, even though it's less than dalit al dalit, especially it's high up, and a small porch, if it's functional, it would be mechuyev in a Maakeh. Now, of course, the Maakeh would be a railing of 40 inches. That's the right way to do it. Maybe we make it 35, but because of Sveika Derais Chumma, a railing of 40 inches, and typically today they're building the porches with a good, a high enough railing. A room that has undignified usage, l'mashal, a beis akise, a merchat, is pater from a mezuzah. The question is it pater also from a Maakeh? So Chaim Kanievsky, in that sefer that I mentioned, Be'alach Chesiv Gimel, he says even if it's pater from mezuzah, because it's not diras of kavod, but Maakeh is totally in sakana. If you use it, it's chayiv in Maakeh. Ma'aseh is a true story. Someone finished his home. He bought a home from a guy, and he did all his what he had to repair. He's about to move in. He realized that the porch had a railing of 30 inches. Now that you can't be saying that's enough. So he didn't know what to do. Maybe he should move in until he gets an iron worker. So then he said, I know what, I have a 30-day grace period. Where's this coming from? From mezuzah. So he made two mistakes. First of all, by mezuzah is chayiv right away. In Eretz Yisrael, you chayiv always. In Chutz La'aretz, if you buy a home, you chayiv right away. The only het of 30 days is rental. No, this is not rental. But besides that, Lamaisa, how do you compare the two? Mezuzah, the reason why you put this is because you might move out. But Maakeh is sakana. So, the Malach HaMavos doesn't give a 30-day grace period. And this l'chayra is mefurish in the Sefer Chikrei Lev, one of the G'dolei Svardim. Chaim Kanievsky in that same Sefer says, Lo matzinu shepatru ad lamid. So the emes is the fact that Shulchan Aruch does discuss Maakeh, and there's no mention of pachas milamid yoim, is pashit, it must be kosher right away. You're moving in, you have to put up mezuzah. But I'll tell you that although mezuzah does add shmira, so how could you live 30 days without shmira? There it is, if there's no chiyuv, you don't need the shmira, or you have the shmira. But you can't compare the shmira of mezuzah to the sakana of Maakeh. But wait, listen to the next question, a beautiful shayla. Someone built a home, whatever it is, or bought a home, whatever it is, and he's not moving in for another 2 weeks. When does the chiyuv Maakeh begin? So we said from day one, from minute one, that's for sure. But based on a sifri, based on a pasuk that we learned today, maybe mechuyev right after you finish building the home. Because the pasuk says, Bayis chodosh, zok the sifri, on this pasuk, Rebbe yoim, mishash chidashtai, asei loim Maakeh. When you mechadish the bayis, when you finish building it, you're mechuyev in a Maakeh. Zok the Netziv in his Pirish on the Sifri, then it's the Sifri is telling us a Chiddush Nifla. That, I think what he means to say is, the din of Maakeh is a Chiv and a bias. it has to be a kosher bias. What does a kosher bias mean? It has to have a maakeh. You're moving in 2 weeks from now. That's true. So you're not moving in yet. But the bias cannot remain without a maakeh. And that's why the Torah is a bias chodosh. The bias that's new has to be kosher with a maakeh. Which again is a big chiddush. The Sifri himself says that Lamaisa, the poskim don't quote this. But there is a tzad to say, again, that the bias needs a maakeh without it being lived in the immediate future. And Lamaisa, the other poskim, don't agree to this, and the word chodosh has different meanings, but the Shevet HaKasi has a nice tshuva in Chelik Gimel, Siman Shin Chaf, Sivkat and Dalid, and he says basically that Lamaisa, until you move in, there's no chiyuv to actually make the maakeh. But again, we see very clearly, very dramatically I should say, that maakeh is very different than mezuzah. Mezuzah, you have 30 days by rental. And here you have maybe, you don't have a day when you're moving in, even rental, and more so maybe even before you even moved in. Important question is who is mechuyev to make the maakeh or pay for it. And again, you're talking about hundreds of dollars. So it comes to mind, I know, let's compare it to Old Faithful mezuzah. Mezuzah is chayvus hador, that's the Pharisee Gemara. Chayvus hador has two halachic implications. Number one, only when you move in. Before you move in, you're not mechuyev. And also, who's responsible to make sure it happens and pay for it? The tenant. Chayvus hador. Can we assume hu adin by maakeh? Chayvus hador. Or maybe, well, we just saw an obvious chilik. Because mezuzah, by a rental at least, you have 30 days. But by a maakeh, there's no 30 days. So maybe we'll say, no, you can't compare it. You can't compare maakeh to mezuzah. But lemaisa, we do find mefurish, Bava Metzia Kuf Aleph Amid Beis, Chayshemish, but not by us. This is in Hilchas Mamanis, of course. Chayshemish B'Shin Yudal Tzif Beis, Hilchas Chiras, where the Mechaber says, based on the Gemara, that maakeh is also chayvus hador, regarding the payment of it, the making of it. Not regarding the chiyuv, but the chiyuv is on the door to make the maakeh. Now, lamaisa, it's not as simple as it seems, because many Rishonim, the Smag, Hagoyis Maimoni, and the Ireya, and this is quoted by the Achronim, all say that midaraisa, the chiyuv, maakeh is on the maskir. It's his house. This is part of the building of the house. See, mezuzah is a mitzvah. This is part of the safety of the house. So why should the soicha build it? It's the maskir's job. The structural problems, you go to the landlord. They all say midaraisa, the chiyuv's on the maskir only. But Chazal knew that people are people, and if you leave it to the maskir, I'll get around to it. You know, yesh machal achazman. So they put a chiyuv d'Rabbanan on the soicha. But the integral chiyuv is on the maskir. Shevet HaLevi, Chelik Kesim, Reish Chaf Aleph, he says, some argue, so how could you argue Rishonim? Midaraisa, the chiyuv is the maskir. Midrabanan on the soicha. So therefore, the soicha has to take care of it. Now, next question is, who pays for it? Okay, so the soicha has the headache, he has to call the ironwork, whatever it is. Could he give the balabas, the landlord, the bill? So again, in Svara, why should the soicha pay for it? Mezuzah is a chiddush, but I can understand that. But this is part of the house. So it's interesting. All the Chayshim Mishpat Paiskim look at it the same you saw it in the Shita Mikubetzes. In Bamatzia Kuf Aleph, the Shita Mikubetzes says, "She'im asoicha yirta l'shtamish b'agag k'deish la'yipol mimenu yasel la'ymaika." You want to use the roof, Taka? Okay, that's up to you, at your own cost. If not for you, there wouldn't be a chiyuv on the roof. You want to use it? Fine. At your own expense. So, I saw this in the Pischei Choishin, in Schiris, Perek Vav, Ha'ara Vav, and the Mishpat HaSchirim, and a wonderful Sefer, and Choishin Mishpat, I saw Schiris Batan Kaloch, it's page 102, 103. All learn from this sheet, the Mikubetzes, that if it's a normal part of the house, in other words, on a front porch, back porch, whatever it is, there's no maakeh, or it's not sufficient. Then, about it's the landlord's job. That you're renting him a house. The house has to be livable. It's not livable. You can't live in it. It's asa to live in that house. But if it's something that's not typically used, the tenant is a chacham and it might use they'll use the roof, they'll keep things in the roof, then they'll put the boxes, whatever. He wants to make it something that's not part of the normal contract at your own expense. But typically, when it's a regular chiyuv of maakeh on a porch or the like, avada, the chiyuv is on the landlord to pay the expenses. In other words, it's pashut that the tenant has to make sure it happens, but to give him the bill, just like if there's a problem with the pipes in the house, anything that's structural goes to the landlord. Renting from a goy, so it's an interesting chiddush. Someone to say, could be there's no chiyuv on the yid, because there's no starting point chiyuv on the goy, which is very illogical. So what should the yid do? Fall off the roof? So it seems that pashut, that there is a chiyuv, at least the rabbanan on the tenant, even though there's no chiyuv deraisa. But lemaisa, sometimes the landlord says, I'm not interested in the guys, I'm not interested in your maakeh. I'm not letting. So you know what the yid has to do? Say, thank you, but I'm going elsewhere. No, had to live there because the guy doesn't let, and that's pashut. Now, lemaisa, where we could use a chiddush, is a person goes to a hotel or a bungalow, and there's no proper maakeh. He's only there for a weekend. So in Hilchos Mezuzah, he's very potter. Hilchos maakeh, why should we potter? He's using it straight. So maybe if it's a goyish owned, maybe you could rely on a sheet that he'll be careful, but no doubt about it, a Yiddish hotel owner or a Yiddish bungalow colony owner should make sure that the property is safe. Beautiful question. A person made a expensive maakeh, he made it to taste, and he had plans of buying a house one day, and when he bought a house, he wanted to pick up the maakeh and transport it to his new home. That wasn't a midas doim. It would cost nothing to transport it, and he has what he likes. But the landlord says, wait a minute, you can't take the mezuzah when you leave, so how can you take the maakeh? So stay true with Madava. First of all, this is a misconception. The landlord does not own the tenant's mezuzahs. He's not leaving him a payah on the field. The landlord, the tenant, takas an ovain chama that remove mezuzahs. It's a whole sugya in Gemara and in Yeridea. But he can't take it for one or two reasons. One reason, the reason is when a person leaves the house without mezuzahs, he invites mazikim, whatever that means. That's the Rishonim Taisa says this. Or the second reason is it's a bezoyin. Ramosh say meraisnish mezuzahs. But lamaisa does not mean it becomes the property of the landlord. The tenant could say, I'm moving out, would you like to buy them off me? Fine, if not, then put up your own and give me those. But it's not a freebie. So why should maakeh be different? But more than that, says to stay chemed in Mareches Mem, the end of Klal Kuf Tzadik Hey, he says, Lamaisa, these svaras don't apply to a maakeh. Because when you don't find that mazikim come and you pull down the maakeh. And you don't find that there's an issa of rice and makis. Don't forget, mezuzahs is a davar shebekadusha, tashmish kedusha. A maakeh is a very important mitzvah, but it's not kadosh. You don't put the maakeh in shemis when you take it off. So it has a different tzura to it. And that's why, believe it or not, there's no issa of removing a maakeh when you're leaving. Of course, don't make sure the next tenant, whatever, does the job, but avada there's no issa. Similarly, there's a chiddush gadol, the Shibali Aleket, one of the Rishonim, Simon Kuf Pehei. He's talking about it's Hilchas Chanukah rather, that you can't have enough from mitzvahs Chanukah, or huadin, you can't do a bezoyin to the maakeh or tzitzis or sukkah. So the question is, that means what? You can't hang your laundry on the maakeh. So Lamais, it seems that he's saying that you have to treat the maakeh with respect. The Minchas Yitzchak Chelik Yud Siman Nun Beis and Halichas Shleima in the beginning of Tefillah Gimel Hara Beis and Rav Sternbach in a beautiful he has a haskama to the Sefer Mitzvahs Habayis, a Sefer Habayis. I'm sorry. They all say this is a chiddush leishamanu. The maakeh is a very important mitzvah, but it's not a tashmisha kedusha. It's at most tashmisha mitzvah. And who said hanging laundry is a bezoyin? Rav Sternbach has a novel yisoid that a mitzvah ben adam lechaveiroi doesn't sharf a cheftish mitzvah b'kedusha. He says tzedakah, keep it off, doesn't make it into a cheftish. You give your parents a nice piece of cake, it's a mitzvah, but the cake doesn't have kedusha to it. So that's what he wants to say. But at the end of the day, I think we could say the hanging laundry or the like is fine. Maybe an emes bezoyin should be avoided. Important question. When Lamaisa, you see that there's no Maakeh. Is there an Issa to go on the place that has no Maakeh? So Lamaisa, by Mezuzah, we once discussed this, that although it's a mitzvah Tadiri, but there's no Issa of living in a house without a Mezuzah. And it seems the same is true regarding Maakeh, believe it or not. The Magen Avraham and Yud Gimel, Sivkat and Ches, Merachar Zerua, Simon Samachals, and others all say there is no Issa in living in a place without a Maakeh. Of course, you have to be very safe. But if there's no Issa, proper Issa, at a place without a Maakeh. Just I want to mention 1 or 2 points, and I must say I wanted to talk about the brachas on Maakeh, but it was much too big of a sugya, so we'll leave it for another share, maybe upcoming soon, the do's and don'ts. But 1 point, I wanted to mention that I couldn't go without. First of all, we have to realize the most important yesod is that Maakeh is unique. It has the asay, a loisasay, and a chamir sakanta misura. So that gives us guidance to the following klal. When you have a suffix, if there's a chiyuv or not, sveika derais l'chumra from mikama taimim. Sveika derais l'chumra, chamir sakanta misura. More so, which is much more negeya, when you have a shaila of, is there chiyuv Maakeh l'mashal? You have a railing on a porch, that's the 30 inches, 34 inches, 35 inches, 37 inches even. So even though some sheets hold it's enough, but you're talking about chamir sakanta misura. I bought a house from a guy, and we have 2 porches. Both of them have railings 30 inches. No, for a guy that's fine, but with children and grandchildren, 30 inches is dangerous. 40 inches is also probably dangerous on a porch. So, kalamois raise them a shubach, but definitely one should not suffice with a Maakeh, a railing on a porch less than 40 inches. And if you see your railing is less than that, so I did it, and not such a great expense. You could call an iron worker; they would just raise the porch, the railing. Avada, you don't make a bracha because l'chumra will say safek bracha l'hakol. Maybe you go with the first one if 35 is enough. But to leave a porch less than 40 inches, I think is pasha dangerous, and it should be repaired. The height of a porch above the ground is also 40 inches, but here you should be machmir l'chara 35. Because the same svara. And one last point I wanted to mention is make sure you measure things. Because again, it looks deceiving. Today you could have porches that you bought from Goyim, that have low porches, and it looks sufficient, but it's not. Baruch Hashem, they're building today new homes, and the railings are sufficient. But again, even 40 inches is still somewhat of a pachad. The ik is we should build homes, because I couldn't talk to you all.
Shem Egan Shir Torah, after we Yeshakar to our Smith for today's share. After we Yeshakar to Rabbi Elisha Hollander for sponsoring today's share, Lilinish Mas Alves, Ramodcha ben Rabbi Elisha Kohen, Zgan Lavacha, Tenish Mosai, through Rabbi Tzarachayim. Have the great schos sponsoring a share. Please call Irgun Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Hashem after Kaddish, or Smith will say Sikim of today's share, and of Maakeh. M'chananya ben Akashi Omer. Not Zakarish Baruch L'Zakis as Yisrael, if you hear him Torah Mitzvah, Shenem Al Anoi Chofes Amal Tzidka, Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.
Hey!
Boys, I want to do that in 2 weeks. On Sunday of Hanukkah, the shir will be from 11 o'clock. The shir, the Sunday morning, or Smith Hanukkah, 11 o'clock. Okay, just to make sure we have all the bases covered of the Sikim and Maakeh.
Let's just review what we learned today. We have a unique mitzvah. It's a loisase and asay and sakana, and the kiyama mitzvah is ongoing. But usually it's very different than the mitzvah mezuzah, although there are some parallels. Basically, there's no ptur chomesh by, that's too much money for your budget, by Maakeh, because there's a loisase. The ikka chiyuv is by a gag or similar to that. Porch is the famous sheet of the chazanish. We hope to get to that at a different time. But basically, things that are used that are similar, might have an element of sakana, l'mashal, a stage, a bunk bed. So there might not be a chiyuv Maakeh, but there's a chiyuv of leisasim. Bunk bed should have a bar. A pool, a mikveh should be locked at all times. Someone asked me about a banister going down, a stairway going down. So that's part of another upcoming share, which is we'll talk about also about the window wells, more barichas. But basically, the important yesod is that there's a leisasim that's independent of the chiyuv of Maakeh. A window that's open, when there are children running around, that could be a chiyuv Maakeh mamish, or certainly a very serious leisasim, and should be cared for. It shouldn't be left chas v'shalom to sakana. A bor or be'er is a unique chiyuv, even though it's less than dalar al dalar, that even the chazanish is maida. Shoveling the snow or getting rid of the ice, even if there's no chiyuv of Maakeh, but there's a chiyuv of leisasim, and of course. Lavud, good asik, all these lamdas does not work for the din of Maakeh. If it's never used, if the roof is never used or rarely used once a year, there are enough places that are makel that when you do go with caution. If you lock the door and no one could get to it, no one has the key, that's enough. A sign doesn't help. When children are going shaloi b'shus to your roof and it's dangerous, so either stop the children or put up a Maakeh, but that can't be let because you can't blame the children. Building a sukkah on a roof is mechayev the gag to have a Maakeh. Could be the sukkah would be a valid gag, Maakeh, if that's the case. But basically, a small area like a porch or a clubhouse less than dalad that's functional is vadei chayev in a Maakeh. Undignified roofs, porches, whatever it is, or rooms are chayev, unlike mezuzah. The chiyuv of Maakeh is right away. There's no tour of lamed yoim. In fact, some say when you finish building before moving in, you chayev. And that's a chiddush. But definitely from moment one, the area has to have a proper Maakeh. The chiyuv is on the soicha to make sure it happens, but the masker typically pays for it unless he takes something that's not part of the contract. Renting from a guy, there's a chiyuv Maakeh, hope the guy lets. The din of Maakeh, you'll have to take with you. The Maakeh is not like mezuzah. The bezoyin should not be done to a Maakeh, but laundry and the like is okay. Living without a Maakeh is no technical issa, but you have to be careful. Every suffix should be treated like a sveika deraisa, and make sure that the railing is high enough on porches. Good. Yeah.